And now, for the first time in 17 years, can you believe it's been that long? For the first time in 17 years, Michigan prepares for a run for the Roses. Next, right here on Michigan Podcast.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deep for Anthony Clark. Waits for it. Hit. Caught.
They said you can't be Ohio State. Now what?
Brady gets terrific. Throws it, and a touchdown, Knight again. Schultz just before Brazil got him, and a leaping interception by Woodson.
Harbaugh back to throw over the middle. Caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet. Touchdown, Michigan. On its way. It's good.
He's 5'7", 179 pounds, a junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris packs a wallop, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming. Sack. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic.
Option. And Robinson calls his own number, and he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Ron Robinson and Michigan.
Win it. We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
Go Blue, I'm Steve Deace, and welcome to our final episode of 2023. And fittingly enough, it is a preview of Michigan's third consecutive trip to the college football playoff and first trip to Pasadena for the granddaddy of them all in 17 years, one of the longest Rose Bowl droughts in the history of the program. Now, of course, we don't have the traditional Big Ten champion automatically goes to the Rose Bowl arrangement that we had in the pre-college football playoff or even pre-BCS era. Nevertheless, there is still a certain level of mystique surrounding that great game and that stadium. Cannot wait going out there with my family, my son, my wife. We are going to the Rose Bowl for the first time ever. Been to the Rose Bowl before, but not for a game. So we are going for the first time ever, as I know many of you are, to cheer on the Maize and Blue. And when you talk about just two of the top 5 programs in the history of college football, Michigan and Alabama, maybe the two most interesting, provocative coaches, big personality coaches in Nick Saban and Jim Harbaugh, and then the ultimate setting there beneath the Arroyo Seco there in Pasadena, and it's just an incredible setting. I cannot wait. Let's talk about the game, though, and let's talk about the matchup. What's been fascinating to watch as of the time we are recording this, which is on December the 13th, approximately 90% of the money that's been wagered so far on the Rose Bowl has been on the Crimson Tide. And there was an initial line movement. Michigan opened up a 2.5-point favorite. The Wolverines then went down to a 1-point favorite and remain 1.5. It is typical when that level of action is one-sided on a team and the spread was already under a field goal, it is typical for that line to then cross over and make the other team the favorite. That has not happened here. Why? Well, I think it's because Vegas is saying it is comfortable being one-sided on the action, at least right now. You know, there might be a level of handle later on. The public does not bet early on games. The public doesn't really move lines, by the way. They don't. Typically, it requires professionals, or sometimes what they're called in the industry, the lingo is sharps. They're the ones that move lines, and they always are the ones that are betting early to move lines. They're jumping on lines right away, trying to spot what they consider to be inefficiencies, and then the lines will adjust based on what they think. And then later, towards the end, if there's a rash of public money one way or the other, or some syndicates or some other forms of professional sharps weigh in, once again, the line way more often responds to them than it does to the public. So with this amount of money being wagered on one side, I find it fascinating that the line has not crossed over to Alabama as a small favorite. And I think the reason why is Vegas's power ratings are showing Michigan should win this game by about a touchdown. And that means they're willing to take on a level of one-sided risk here by leaving Michigan the favorite. And in fact, Michigan's even gained a half a point in the spread in the last few days, as I just said a few moments ago. There are real reasons for that. Alabama nearly lost to a 4-8 Arkansas team. Alabama only scored 17 points against South Florida. The Crimson Tide needed a 4th and 31 miracle against 6-6 Auburn. This is a very good Alabama team. There's a reason it's in the playoff. It won the SEC championship, and it did so by dealing Georgia its first loss in 29 games. The last time Georgia lost was to Alabama in the SEC championship game back in 2021. It deserves to be here. But this isn't a vintage Alabama team. This is not the team we even faced in the Citrus Bowl a couple of years ago with 3 future first-round picks at wide receiver and a first-round top 10 pick at quarterback. It's not that team. I think if you look at where Alabama has been exposed at times this year defensively, it fits right in the wheelhouse of what Michigan wants to do. It has struggled against the run, particularly with mobile quarterbacks when they are added to the running game. I mean, the Michigan State transfer that Auburn landed, he's somewhat mobile, nowhere near as athletic as JJ, and Auburn ran for around 300 yards against Alabama in that Iron Bowl back there over Thanksgiving weekend. You have to hope now with a good 3 to 4 weeks of rest, whatever that lower body injury was that was limiting the game plan for J.J. McCarthy, you have to think now maybe there's no tomorrow. So let's let it fly. Let's go back to what we were doing at the beginning of the year when the offense was actually built around him and not the running game, but he was the focal point, and injecting him into the running game is what gave the running game some juice. I think with J.J. McCarthy, an active part of the running game, the inside run with Blake Corum and to a lesser degree Donovan Edwards is going to open up. This is not vintage Alabama with Jonathan Allen, Quinnen Williams kinds of defensive tackles just destroying the inside gaps of your offensive line. And that they don't have those kinds of players. Now, it is a vintage Alabama team with the guys they have like Dallas Turner and others coming off the edge. It is a vintage Alabama team. And so that's another reason why you want to get that inside running game going. You want to make J.J. McCarthy a running threat. You want to slow that rush down. You want to avoid as many obvious 3rd and long passing situations. We have faced way too many of those the last few games since J.J. was injured. We've got to get back to having 2nd and 6 and 2nd and 5 again so we stay out of 3rd and 8. That's a big key, but I think the way Michigan matches up against this Alabama defensive front, that is absolutely possible. This is not an Alabama offense that has a breakaway threat at tailback or even a Derrick Henry kind of figure at tailback. Again, it's Alabama. Their tailbacks are good. These guys were all 4-star recruits, but by Alabama standards, they're okay. They're pretty good. Alabama doesn't have the Jalen Waddle kind of receiver. Remember, I mentioned when we faced that team in the Citrus Bowl back in 2019, all 3 of those guys were first-round draft picks. John Mechie who's the 4th receiver, he would go on to be a second-round draft pick. They don't have that kind of talent there right now. So I think that there's more opportunities where you can play man on the outside, particularly where Will Johnson is concerned, provided that he's back after a few weeks of rest and 100% again. And then you've got the speed at linebacker with guys like Junior Colson and others that you can provide the spy on Jalen Milroe. Heck, maybe you even have nickelback, Mike Sainristil, spy Jalen Milroe. Jalen Milroe's passing game is he's an excellent deep ball thrower. great touch on the deep ball. You want to make him complete that intermediate pass. That's what he has struggled to do for Alabama. Great on the deep ball. He's a phenomenal runner, but he is still developing as a passer. Can he make that consistently, that 12 to 18 yard pass up the seam on a 3rd and 7? If you're Jesse Minter, that's what you want to make Jalen Milroe do. You do not want to do, frankly, what happens when you see the Detroit Lions play a running quarterback like Justin Fields recently, overcommitting in gaps to try to get to the quarterback to create pressure, just exploits those that lack of rush discipline and the loss of leverage in your rush lanes and runs for easy first downs. Jalen Milroe will do that all day long. You want to keep him in the pocket, make him read the defense, and deliver the ball on time in intermediate routes. And again, that fits a lot of what Michigan tries to do defensively. I think a lot of the same kind of defensive game plan that Michigan's played against Ohio State the last couple of years that has been successful is probably what you're going to see Michigan do on New Year's Day against Alabama. I think Michigan matches up about as well as you can hope to match up against a Nick Saban-era Alabama team. And for that reason, I think Michigan's going to win its first Rose Bowl since 1997. Michigan is number 1 for the first time since it entered that Rose Bowl, number 1. I think Michigan will play for the national championship a week later on Championship Monday and play for it all against either Texas or future conference opponent Washington. I do think Michigan matches up well. If JJ is able to go in the running game, then Michigan is the kind of team that matches up well with this iteration of Alabama, and I believe the Wolverines will get it done, provided JJ is healthy enough to be active in the running game. And I think that's also why Vegas has remained aligned behind Michigan despite all of the action, almost all of it professional bettors, by the way, all of that action lined up behind the Crimson Tide. Well, let's find out what our good friend Mark Rogers thinks. He probably has a different perspective as a Buckeye. We'll find that out for sure next. Well, let's find out what perhaps the world's one and only reasonable Bucknut happens to think about the Rose Bowl matchup and more. Our good friend Mark Rogers joining us now. Check out his channel right here on YouTube, the voice of college football. And I know what you're thinking. The season's winding down. That's actually why you want to follow his channel all the more. Get ahead of those futures markets that are going to debut, folks, as soon as just a few weeks here already. So because he's covering the sport year-round, those stringers, correspondence, all the roster movement and everything else that is going on, he'll be all over it, on top of it, all year round on his channel. Make sure you check it out. Mark, Merry Christmas to you. Welcome to our Rose Bowl preview, brother. How are you?
I am doing great, Steve. Merry Christmas to you, and hopefully a happy New Year.
I hope so. I will say this. For me, this is gravy at this point. I mean, we're going out to the Rose Bowl. We could not be more excited to get a chance as a family to go out and see that spectacle in person for the first time. And if we lose, or even if we lose bad, I'll be disappointed, but it really won't take anything away from the season we just had at all. Maybe I'm just getting older now, but I can't get myself to the point that winning the league, beating Ohio State and going 13-0 is just not satisfactory. I'm just too old for that, man. I can't get there. I can't. I mean, I was very disappointed when we blew that game with TCU last year because we were the clear favorite and should have been, But, I mean, if we lose to Alabama and Nick Saban in the Rose Bowl, how in the world does that undermine everything else we've accomplished all season long? To me, it will not. One iota.
Well, I would say on one hand, if we did not have a change in the Big Ten coming up next season with the 4 new entries and a lot of hope there to compete nationally on a regular basis with the SEC, I would argue with you to a certain extent because of Michigan's most recent postseason history and because of the Big Ten lagging well behind the SEC. And the SEC, this is just a staggering statistic, 14-3 in the college football playoff when they're not playing each other. But I believe that there are, some killer programs obviously lined up in the Big Ten to join if they get there together, USC in particular, that there are hopeful days for the Big Ten. But Michigan is the flag bearer right now and needs to do something. When is the last time that Michigan won an out-of-conference game that you believe truly proved something? So the last big win was 2019 against Notre Dame, against a top 10 to 15 ranked team outside the conference. But when was the last time Michigan really proved something outside the conference? It's been a long, long time. And this is a school that, with all of Ohio State's struggles, and the SEC has been Ohio State's kryptonite. And if there's one statistic you can throw at any Ohio State fan, including myself, that I can navigate most conversations pretty well, but that's one that's difficult to get around 2-12 in bowl play. Michigan has fared well against the SEC traditionally, however, a rough ride here recently, just like just about everyone else.
I mean, I'm a Michigan fan, so I'm used to losing bowl games, particularly in January. It's just that kind of just goes with the territory. Real quick, 23 college football games this year averaged over 7 million TV viewers. 23 of them did. All right. 19 of those 23 games featured at least one team that will be in either the Big Ten or the SEC next season. 19 of the 23. Two of those four that did not were games that Deion Sanders played. Deion Sanders coached Colorado TCU, Colorado State, right? So what that really is telling you is if you're not in the Big Ten or the SEC, or you didn't hire one of the biggest celebrities in the history of contemporary American sports to coach your team, not a lot of people are watching. I mean, that's just kind of flat out what that's telling you. Thoughts?
We did a look at the TV ratings for 2022 last offseason, and I love television ratings. I don't know what got me so into it. At 9-10 years old, I was looking at television ratings in the newspaper. But so I enjoy that aspect of it as well. What's even more impressive, and I'll give Michigan even a stronger bid in this than Ohio State from this perspective. With that awful non-conference schedule the last two seasons, Michigan was getting that noon Eastern time ABC look a number of those times the last 2 years in those 6 games, and was putting up plus 4 million views on those games against Colorado State and Hawaii and others, and going up against strong games from other conferences, out-of-conference games that were really meaningful, interesting, competitive games. And we're watching 59-0. It's just amazing, the brand of the top two in the Big Ten. But in particular, Michigan, in those weak non-conference games, still pulling a massive audience that, think of this, I didn't look at this last year's, just in the last few weeks, the big rivalry games in the Pac-12, but USC-UCLA in 2022, that was the highest rated game of the season in the Pac-12. All of Michigan's non-conference games against those horrible teams did better than USC-UCLA.
Wow.
Ohio State Northwestern did better than USC-UCLA.
Wow. I think that really sets the tone for what's coming with this new era that begins next year. But we've got one more season of this era that still must culminate. So let's get to the granddaddy of them all, the Rose Bowl. I'll kind of lay out my generic analysis without repeating the entire monologue I just did, just to kind of give you a place to start off from. I think, in general, Michigan matches up better with a Nick Saban coached Alabama team than you could, in most years, hope to, I would say. That is maybe the best way I would put it. It's still a very good team, won the SEC for a reason, but also could have lost to Arkansas for a reason. Also, put up 17 points against South Florida for a reason. Also, should have lost to Auburn, except for one of the all-time miracle plays in the history of college football for a reason. The one matchup that I think really explains why Vegas has let Michigan remain the favorite despite the fact about 90+% of all the money bet so far in this game, and you and I both know if it's early betting, it's almost all pros, sharps, okay? Over 90% of the money is on Alabama, and yet Vegas still remains with Michigan the favorite rather than that number crossing over, and I think this is why. There is no Quinnen Williams, Jonathan Allen level of player at defensive tackle for Alabama this year. This is not a year where they've got that game wrecker there that just blows up the inside gaps of your offensive line. Well, what is the entirety of Michigan's offense predicated on? Establishing the inside run. The entirety of it is. That's where we bring in now later on in the game a zone read with a J.J. McCarthy. Once it's clear you're crashing on that, that's Michigan's play action game. The inside zone run is to Michigan what the fullback dive was to Woody Hayes, what the student body right was to John McKay. It is the linchpin play of the entire Michigan offensive scheme under Jim Harbaugh, and I think that they will be able to do that effectively, particularly if J.J. McCarthy is fully healthy again. And now with there being no tomorrow, no reason to save him. I think he was healthy enough to run against Iowa. I think they realized they didn't have to risk him taking a hit to win that game, okay? Now, though, there's no tomorrow, and I think he'll fully be involved in the running game. And he's only got to do it a few times to keep them honest. And then I think the play action comes off of that. I think that's the biggest matchup in the game that favors Michigan. On the defensive side, this is not even the Alabama offense that we played in the Citrus Bowl with a first-round quarterback in Tua and 3 first-round wide receivers. They don't have that kind of ability on the outside. I think we can play a lot of man. I think if Will Johnson can play Marvin Harrison man for 2.5 quarters and at least kind of hold his own, which is the best you can hope for, I think he can probably do that against Isaiah Bond. And that allows us, I think you can have a Mike Sainristil or somebody else basically spy Jalen Milroe, play a lot of the funnel defense we played against Ohio State, keep the quarterback in the pocket. Don't let him get outside. Don't let him break contain to make big plays or broken plays down the field. Make him throw it consistently to a second or third read. If you watch Jalen Milroe this year, I know you've done a lot of it as well. The guy throws maybe the most beautiful deep ball in all of college football, but it's either that or kind of nothing. It's either a bomb or he takes off running. This is not a guy that sits in a pocket, goes through his progressions, and hits a seam 18 yards downfield on 3rd and 8. That's just not who he is yet. He's a developing player, and I think if you're Michigan, you make him do that. And at the end of the game, if he did that to you, you tip your cap. We had a great year. Good luck in the national championship game. So I do think there are matchups here that favor Michigan, given the style it wants to play. There are matchups that favor Alabama. I do think coming off the edge, this is as good as Alabama typically is with guys like Dallas Turner. I just don't know how much that's a big issue for us given the way that we want to play. It kind of feels like if them coming off the edge is a problem, then we lost the game because we couldn't do what we really wanted to do. You see what I'm saying? Because we don't really want to drop back and throw the ball 30 times in the game anyway. So I think there are some real matchups that favor Michigan here. There's a reason why Vegas's power ratings say Michigan should win by a touchdown, and I think that's why Vegas has accepted, so far anyway, all of this one-sided liability on this game.
Well, I will say you brought up this 2019 matchup, and I never gave this consideration, but as soon as you mentioned those two teams getting together in a game that Michigan led at halftime, and Alabama was clearly the better team, but and of course, Mac Jones was the quarterback for Alabama that season.
Thank you. Different first-round draft quarterback. My bad. Thank you.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah. Michigan's so much better today than they were in 2019. There's no comparison. Maybe some components on defense, wide receiver is comparable, but just a much better team now than they were then. Alabama, though, I know that they didn't make the college football playoff in 2019. But you could make an argument that team was better than this team.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, you could easily make that argument. Just huge impact NFL players on defense. The wide receiver core was ridiculous. Najee Harris at running back. And yes, a first-round quarterback, which Jalen Milroe may turn out to be because the NFL has gone in that direction. So he may continue to blossom and become that type of player, but he's not quite there yet. So that's a pretty apt comparison. You took it in a direction that I was going to take it about J.J. McCarthy running. He wasn't right with the knee issue the last couple of games of the season, but he's going to have a lot of time to rest up and be ready. I think he's going to have to factor into this a little bit more than a couple times. But yeah, if he can prove that he's healthy and prove that that quarterback run needs to be feared and respected by Bama, that's going to be enormous in opening up running lanes that haven't been there to the extent that they were in 2021 and 22. I just did a breakdown. I haven't released the video, but I was going to go through all the statistics on both sides of the ball, and not just the standard statistics, but a little bit more advanced, and then also looking at the opponents that contributed to those numbers. And of course, Michigan has fallen off considerably in rushing yards per game and in average yards per rush. I am concerned from a Michigan standpoint about the way the offensive line looked later in the season. Zach Zinter's gone. They played a strong final portion of the fourth quarter without him. And of course, they only produced 213 yards of total offense against Iowa. I understand the game approach is different. You know that they're not going to score. You get a 2-score lead, and you're ultra conservative. But it's a heck of a matchup on both sides of the ball. These are two evenly matched teams, just in different ways. I just have so much trust in and respect for Nick Saban in this situation. It's going to be difficult for me to pull the trigger on the Michigan side because of that, unless I can really dive in and find a nuts and bolts X's and O's advantage for Michigan, a clear one. I don't see it.
What's the clear advantage for Alabama?
The clear advantage is once Jalen Milroe gets outside the pocket and starts running around, then that becomes an issue. Now
So
you're
street
talking
ball.
about a
So
spy.
street ball.
Yeah, and you talk about a spy. Georgia at times went to 2 spies on him, but then that made them susceptible downfield. Georgia didn't run the ball that effectively on Bama. They were able to contain the run, and that Georgia offensive line is every bit as good and probably this season better than Michigan's. So let's not discount this Alabama defense, and we may be watching the 2 best corner combinations in all of college football on both sides, with McKinstry and Arnold on the Alabama side, Sanders-Still and Will Johnson on the Michigan side.
I can point to you. I agree that is Alabama's biggest advantage, but I think you have missed a clear advantage that Michigan has, and that's our tight ends against their linebackers. I think that is absolutely a clear advantage, and I think you will see Michigan exploit that extensively in this game. Never really got to see Georgia do that. Brock Bowers got hurt. Never really got to see that. Michigan, you're going to see. I think you're going to see Michigan do a lot of that in this game. I think the personnel matchup in Alabama's favor that is irrelevant is their corners against our receivers, because that's just really not a huge staple in our passing game. Period. All right. I mean, Roman Wilson has 11 touchdowns. He's caught like 40-something balls. The tight ends are going to be what I think attacking the middle of the field. The whole linchpin to this, though, is JJ has to be a factor in the running game. And I think that if he is, then I think Michigan will win. I think if he's not, I think Alabama will win. Either way, I think you're probably looking at like a 23-20, 24-20 kind of a game, regardless of who wins, is kind of what I think will happen.
Is Michigan going to take advantage of those tight ends, though? They could have done that against Ohio State more often, and they just chose not to, I guess. Those guys were the only guys open consistently, and Colston Loveland caught, 3 balls, and maybe A.J. Barner caught 2? Those guys could have caught 8 or 10 passes in that game. So I don't know that – I don't see them putting up those kind of numbers just because they never do. That's and Alabama had to deal with Brock Bowers like 3 times, this being an injured Brock Bowers, a compromised Brock Bowers, but he tore them to shreds pretty well the other 2 championship matchups, but they were able to, contain everybody else and make him beat them, which he did on occasion, to be competitive in a national championship game to the final 5 minutes and to win an SEC title game.
Well,
and has Jim Harbaugh figured out how to prepare a team with 4 weeks off?
Well, that's the big question. I mean, I don't know what's worse right now. Whatever Dan Campbell is telling the Lions at halftime, or Jim, what's worse, a Dan Campbell halftime prep or a Jim Harbaugh bowl prep? All right, I mean, both of those things right now are highly questionable. That is the biggest problem if you're a Michigan fan, is what in the world goes on here in the 4 weeks before or between when we play either the Big Ten championship game in Ohio State or a bowl game, right? Because it's typically 4 weeks. If we lose to Ohio State, it's 4 weeks until we play some meaningless, late December bowl game. If we beat Ohio State, it's 4 weeks from the championship game to a college football playoff game. So that is the $64,000 question, is what in the world is it, whatever the Jim Harbaugh bowl prep is, do the opposite of everything, because that's been a disaster since his very first year. They won that Citrus Bowl, and then a lot of them have even been ugly efforts. I go back to the Outback Bowl. We were up 19-0 midway through the third quarter, ended up getting run out of the stadium in that game. So that's been a consistent issue for sure. All right, give us your prediction then before we let you go. What do you think happens?
Man, I don't want to steal your score, but it's probably flipped in regards to the winner. I got to go Alabama wins this game 27-23.
All right. Good stuff, my friend. Hope you have a great Christmas. All right, we'll see you in 2024.
Thanks, Steve. Sounds good.
You bet. This week's Twitter poll results, we asked you, who wins the Rose Bowl? Bit of a biased sample. I don't think there's 70% odds that, or 69, nice % odds that Michigan's going to win the Rose Bowl, but our Michigan fan base Twitter following does. 69% it's Michigan, 31% it's Alabama, which brings us to our feedback of the week. In response to these poll results, Sisulego writes, the Vegas dynamic is interesting. We were just talking about this early in the show, remember. 90% of the action on Bama, yet the line isn't moving and Michigan is still favored. You can't find a neutral media person or gambling expert who isn't picking Alabama. Everyone is on Alabama except Vegas. I like it. I think that is something to watch, especially given the amount of money that's going to be wagered on this game. First of all, just as a college football playoff game. Secondly, a ton of money is wagered on every game Alabama or Michigan plays, no matter who they're playing anyway. Thirdly, it's a college football playoff game where Michigan and Alabama are playing each other. So if you're of one side here, if you're one-sided on your liability, and it's not the same as being one-sided on your liability of a Louisiana Monroe Troy State game in the middle of October. That is a lot of exposure if you are a sports book, and right now the books, they've allowed that exposure to happen. They've allowed that public money to come in so overwhelmingly on the Crimson Tide and have left Michigan as the favorite. That's why they play the games, and they're playing this one on New Year's Day. Can't wait. It's been a great season. It's been an exceptional season, an incredible season, a historic one. No matter what. Everything that happens from here, just the cherry on top. Can't wait to get to Pasadena. Hopefully get to see a lot of you while we're there. Go Blue. Enjoy your Christmas and New Year. Enjoy your holiday. See you in Pasadena. In the meantime, don't forget to like, rate, subscribe, share, follow, whether you're watching right here on YouTube or listening on iTunes. We would love it if you did those things because they help us to find more Michigan fans just like you. And hello to our Crimson Tide lurkers that are watching this as well in advance of the Granddaddy. In between episodes, make sure you tune into us via Twitter or X at Michigan Podcast. There is where you'll find us at Michigan Podcast on Twitter via or /X, whatever you want to call it, whatever Elon's calling it these days. And we appreciate all of you that follow us there as well. Again, have a great holiday season. Hope to see you all in Pasadena. Until we see each other then, I'm Steve Deace. Go Blue.